Welcome back to Pop Goes the 60s. I'm Matt Williamson. I'm going to do a book review today on Jonathan Gould's Can't Buy Me Love. Now, about a year ago, I did kind of an overall book review on my 5 favorite Beatle books, where I actually covered my 5 favorite and then an additional 10 books. That went over well. People suggested a lot of other books, so I did a follow-up video that discussed maybe another 20 or so books. And along the way, I missed one very important book that many of you recommended to me, and that was Can't Buy Me Love by Jonathan Gould. It's a complete Beatles biography. It came out in 2007. And one of the things, this is it right here, I don't have the dust cover on it, but this is valuable because Gould, he addresses things from a musicological standpoint, along with the cultural impact the Beatles had in the 60s in a way very few writers do. Now, this book isn't that big, about 600 pages, and he packs a lot in. So one of the things that I didn't realize is, and I think I missed this because it came out, I guess, in the wake of post-anthology. You know, he had all these biographies, you know, when John Lennon died and before the anthology. And then there was a new batch of them that came out, you know, around this time. Oh boy, you coming up here? Come on, come on. You didn't do this before I started the video. Get up here. So this book kind of fell through the cracks in terms of where I was paying attention to, and I kind of missed it. And I'd heard a little bit about it over the years, but never really took the time to check it out. There's so many Beatle books. And this book was extremely popular when it came out. In fact, in the first 2 months after publication, it was reprinted 3 times in hardcover. So I didn't even realize it was that popular, but apparently it was. So let me just read to you a couple of reviews that came out right around when the book came out. We'll start with Mark Rotella of Publishers Weekly. Gave Can't Buy Me Love a starred signature review and said that Gould has written an engrossing book, both fluid and economical. Gould's deft hand makes the book sing. It's music writing at its best. Now, I'll give you a couple examples from the book that'll explain what he means by that. Here's another review by Anthony DeBarros from USA Today. He wrote that while another book about the Beatles, perhaps the single most dissected band in the history of rock and roll, seems a superfluous exercise, Gould's work excels by providing what's been missing in many biographies, context. So I think that the value of this book really has to do with looking at it from such an outside perspective, and after a number of years, where it doesn't make every step the Beatles took make it look like some profound step. You know, some of this stuff was happenstance. Some of it was told in a way that probably shouldn't be, which was too whitewashed by many writers that come with many biases. And this one does not. So let me read to you, I'm going to read you 5 little samples here. So I'm going to read you one from the prologue. And let's see, where are we at here? Okay, the years of the story coincide with a period of rampant social and cultural change in Britain and America, and throughout the industrialized world. In Britain, this transformation began with the election in 1945 of a Labour government committed to the dismantling of the British Empire, reforming the British class system, and providing for the health and education of the populace through the creation of a socialist welfare state. So that's the kind of setup he's describing the world before the Beatles came on it, and what made the Beatles be able to have the success, because certain things, the timing of a lot of this stuff coincided with the rise of the Beatles. So the work is peppered with that. Let's go to another segment here. This is when they're first starting to get probably the Hamburg period. Their ages, their scruffy appearance, their casual air of camaraderie, and their jaunty familiarity with which they brandish their guitars all conspire with the derelict surroundings to make them look less professional entertainers than like soldiers in the field, which is what they were, in a manner of speaking, a tiny band of music partisans operating in an obscure theater of culture war whose outbreak had barely been noticed at the time. Pretty sharp. Very nicely said. So the book has got several cultural references that's outside of the Beatles, you know, looking at the Beatles from an outside perspective and not as of that as a fan. Let's go up forward here to 1967, talking about the song All You Need Is Love. There is no better illustration of the Beatles' ability to be all things to all people than this powerfully ambiguous song. Many listeners, caught up in the millennial spirit of the summer of 1967, took the words to be saying that all things are made possible by love. Others, more appreciative of the Beatles as tricksters than as troubadours, noted the joke of the La Marseillaise and the brain-teasing syntax of the verses and pronounced the song a spoof. Yet All You Need Is Love is no more conducive to a knowing interpretation than it is to a naive embrace. It spreads a deadpan Liverpudlian irony over the most cliched sentiment in all of the popular music, not to debunk the sentiment, but rather to free the sentiment from its imprisonment in the cliche. Now that's some writing, folks. So that's what you're going to get in Can't Buy Me Love. Just do two other quickies here. We'll jump up to, this is when Harrison was visiting San Francisco, summer of '67, so right around the same time as All You Need Is Love. By August 1967, the San Franciscan strain of urban hippie utopianism had proved a delicate flower indeed. After blooming spectacularly in the spring and sending its spore billowing eastward on gusts of media hype, the scene in the Haight had collapsed into Malthusian crisis of homelessness, drug crime, and social disease at the height of the summer of love. So, Harrison kind of reiterated that when he said there was all these spotty people and drugged out people when he visited there. And, Gould goes on to say, to some extent, George Harrison's reaction to the squalor of Haight Street was simply a reminder of how elevated the Beatles' own standards of comfort and taste had become during the 5 years they lived in a celebrity world of suburban mansions, deluxe hotels, doting tailors, and chauffeured limousines. So he takes a poke at the Beatles in a way that, I have to agree with him. The Beatles were in a bubble of their own, and it's particularly in swinging London during that period, they had no idea what was going on in the States in terms of some of this hippie movement. And he saw firsthand, and he saw it at a time right when it was beginning to decline in the worst way. And finally, let's leave you something from '68, the formation of Apple. Having finished with the Maharishi's brand of pop mysticism, the Beatles returned to Britain in the spring of 1968 and plunged headlong into the equally thorny paradox of hip capitalism. The basic idea for Apple Corp had been around since the summer of 1967, when Bryce Hamner and Company, the accounting firm that represented Nebs, advised Brian Epstein that the most efficient way for the Beatles to shelter their record and film royalties from Britain's onerous personal income tax was by investing those funds in a complex of self-owned companies that would convert personal income into capital gains. Which is very true. I mean, the whole whitewash of the Beatles themselves saying that the creation of Apple was going to be some kind of Western communism. Bring us your films, bring us your songs. We won't say no. So it was just kind of a big joke. They looked at almost none of the stuff that was sent to them. And it was to create a tax shelter, which it did for a while before it outlived its usefulness and they started outspending the tax benefits. So anyway, this book is wonderfully written, and it reminds me, I would say it's on the same power of Revolution in the Head by Ian MacDonald, which is also, it takes a very sharp look from a cultural standpoint at the Beatles and the 60s revolution, which is why it's called Revolution in the Head. So both of these books I now have on my bookshelf next to each other, and I think you would like it as well. Let's see here. I'm reminded that I did a video a few months ago talking about Mark Lewison, and many of you are patiently waiting for his volume 2 of all these years. I've been trying to bring up some books that people can read in the meantime. This is one excellent one, and as you can see, it's not very big. It's quite an easy read, actually. So there's things to occupy you with some good Beatle material as we all patiently wait for Mark Lewison's volume 2. Now, one of the things I also want to mention is this very good book by Gould took 17 years to write. So these things are not done quickly, and with patience typically comes very fine work. So that's my review for Camp Am Your Love by Jonathan Gould. Pick it up. I'll leave a link below so you can link to it real quick if you want to just have a quick look, check out the prices, and we'll see you next time here on Pop Goes the 60s.